Wednesday. As Lauren mentioned, I am Shanae Jenkins, the very, very, very proud board president for Professional Dimensions. And I'm so excited about this topic today. This was a topic that I broached with Megan back at the beginning of the year because we as women show up in so many different spaces and places. And sometimes we forget that when we lead and make tough decisions, that it has everything to do with our faith. And so thought that it would be really nice for us to have that conversation today. So I just want to just remind you of the platform that we're talking through today. These elements will influence our time together and shape the way that leaders operate within the business world. Our esteemed panelists will bring their wealth of experience and insight into how their personal beliefs and identities have impacted their professional journeys. So not to mention how important this topic is, but everyone that's up here today has a personal story to share, which you'll hear a little bit more about. But we are super, super, super excited to have the conversation facilitated by one of our very own, Dr. Lacey C. Robbins. She is a leadership and personal development consultant. She is an executive coach. She is an author. She's a keynote speaker. She's an on-air expert. She's a seminar facilitator. She's a pastor's wife. She's my PD sister. And fun fact, we go way back to college. She was my best friend since sixth grade's roommate her freshman year at Fisk University. So we go way back. She knew me when. I knew her when. So without further ado, turn it over to Lacey for the introductions for today. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. All right, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right, we have one on the table right here as well. If we can pass that down. I am so excited and honored to be able to facilitate this conversation as a woman of faith. My t-shirt, I think, says it all. God is indeed my CEO. And as we get into today's conversation, we have some amazing and dynamic women that are here with us. And I'd like for them to each take a moment and introduce themselves via like the Twitter, the X version, depending on age, Reader's Digest version of who you are, what faith you identify with, and what leadership role that you also identify with for our ladies here in the audience as well as online. So we'll just start right here.
Great. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Janine Najib. And if you haven't noticed, I'm Muslim. And I think I remember one of the questions being like, have you ever had to hide your identity, your faith identity? And that's going to be a little bit difficult. But I am the founder and the current executive director of the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. I also run the Islamic Resource Center. I publish the Wisconsin Muslim Journal, and we host also the Milwaukee Muslim Film Festival, as well as our Peaceful Home, which is a culturally specific domestic violence program. I'm here, of course, to talk about my faith, and my faith journey has been quite long, particularly in interfaith relations. My parents were part of the very first Muslim-Christian dialogue in the country here in Milwaukee, believe it or not. And I have kind of followed in those footsteps, and currently I am the first female and the second female, I'm sorry, and the first non-Christian to lead the Religious Leaders Caucus for MICA, which is the Milwaukee Intercity Congregations Allied for Hope, predominantly pastors and male pastors, etc. I also have for 10 years been chair of the Committee for Interfaith Understanding of the Interfaith Conference, and long time just involved in a lot of these areas. So
awesome. Can we give it up for Janan and welcome her to the panel? Okay, EJ.
Hello, everyone. So excited to see you all and see you all. I am Erica Joy Daniels. I guess my identity is Madam Ecumenical. So I was raised Catholic. I had a college Baptist experience, and then lo and behold, I married a Pentecostal preacher. So, but there's something common, which I think will come out in our conversation. That's a ribbon of thread of core belief for me. I am also a recent releasee. I escaped from the corporate world And I'm an entrepreneur now and started my own consulting firm with a team of amazing minds at the top of the year. So that's me.
Congratulations. Let's give it up for Erica Joy Daniels.
Hi, I'm Sarah Junio. Thank you for coming today. I would call myself a Christian and grew up Wisconsin Synod Lutheran. So for those of you that are familiar with the many different denominations of Lutheranism, Wisconsin is the most conservative side that you could grow up on. I've since gone a little bit to the left, so to speak, and become a little bit more on the liberal side, but I identify as a Lutheran Christian. I am a specialist in organizational change and conflict management. So I do a lot of coaching and consulting with individuals and organizations on how to manage conflict. And that has an impact on how we handle organizational change, believe it or not. So the two go hand in hand together. My story is, even though I grew up Wisconsin Synod Lutheran, in a small little farming community, they always say make your mess your message. And my mess happened to be around abandonment. A lot of things going in the farm, we lost the farm, and everything that happened back then carried through into my life, where I started to see that theme, that thread of not necessarily abandonment, but how change, in order for you to transform, you need to go through that abandonment, shedding that old skin, so to speak, and being able to see that new person coming out. So I liken it to how God weaves his way in through your entire life and makes your mess your message.
Awesome. Can we give it up for Sarah on today? So again, we want to say, ladies, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Now, typically when people think about faith and faith in action, it tends to also align with ethics. And a lot of times people equate a person with impactful and efficient ethics as a person who is faith-based. So I'm curious, can you provide an example where your faith-based ethical considerations had a significant impact on business in the negative or the positive? And why don't we start with you, Sarah?
Wasn't expecting to go first on that question, but thank you. So I would say, from an ethical perspective, where I run into situations, one would question, is this ethical, or is it just a different perspective on how we're approaching things? And when it gets down to, from a faith-based perspective, even coming here today and speaking today caused a little bit of angst for people in my community, where I had to do some backpedaling and saying, look, these opinions today are of my own. They are not of my employer or my clients or anybody that I work with. And you can step back and say, is that an ethical decision, or is that really a difference in how we're approaching our situation? And so I always liken it to, how do you go and figure out what's the root cause that is causing the angst? Sometimes there's some legitimate, true ethical decisions that you have to step back and say, all right, I didn't know the letter of the law. I am following the spirit of the law, and I need to adjust my aspects and my perspective on that. And that has sometimes gets me in trouble, but oftentimes will allow me to see what's the right direction that I want to go in. There's usually a lot of prayerful consideration in that too, lead me to the way and going forward. But that's usually how I approach things.
Awesome. Let's turn it over to you, Erica Joy.
Yeah, I think for me, I think of ethical decisions, and I'm always mindful of how it's going to impact someone else. And so on the people side of things, large part of my career. So people probably most recently know me as a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner and leader. The bulk of my career has been talent management, so people, processes, and approaches. And when it came to performance, accountability, holding people accountable, terminations, this year I'm going discipline, my faith really had to show up with, how was I going to balance understanding people and being compassionate with being responsible and attuned to the business that I had to represent. And that could be hard. And for me, I always had to lead with seeking to understand. Old adage of seeking to understand first, understand the situation, understand the background, understand the person themselves. I'll never forget one time when I had a tough decision, and there was an employee that in a former company that was working with their leader, and they were just ready to just fire them. And I was like, we can't go that fast, that close, right? Let's understand first. They didn't want to seek to understand anything. And it got to the place where I showed the compassion through my seeking, not for pardoning what they did. Right. See where I'm going? So you have to balance how you apply it. So the compassion came to stop and understand the situation more fully, and the individual ended up being error. But what I found was the compassion enabled them to receive the message differently. And I'll never forget leaving court that day. And they lost their case, and our organization came up. I had to say won, but we ended up on the winning side. And I saw them about 2 years later in a retail store, and the person came on. I saw them. I kind of like shuddered, like, "Oh my gosh, I fired this person," right? And they said, "You know what, EJ? That was the best thing that could have ever happened to me." And it said it challenged them on their own personal development. So again, bringing it into an ethical situation, balancing who you represent as a company, but who you represent as yourself. Because first and foremost, the companies may change, but I'm always going to be Erica Joy and have to be true to that.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to leave the last thought to you with regards to this question.
Sure. I think it also starts with, what you want to do with your life. I actually started my life as a microbiologist. But then I chose to go into this field because of ethics, because of what I really believed in, what I felt drew me as what is my purpose, what is my purpose in life. I think that when you talk about working with others, at least I draw upon a tradition that I have within the faith that says that, if someone has done wrong, give them 99 excuses. And if you gave them 99 excuses and you still think they're wrong, look for the 100th excuse. And so this sometimes gets me in trouble, even with other staff, because they think that I'm too lenient at times, because sometimes you have to be harsh. But the way I look at it is that what are we here to do in this life? It's also mentoring. It's also helping people to understand, helping them to succeed. That's not to say that there haven't been instances where I've had to fire individuals where people just, it just did not work out, for whether it was, lack of honesty, lack of something that really ethically within an organization, you just cannot compromise on certain things. But the thought of, doing no harm to people and doing your best to help them out, to mentor them. And then if all else fails, you are also responsible for the organization and the success of the organization and everyone else in it. So.
Thank you, ladies. So each one of you actually spoke to an instance of conflict being here today, dealing with termination. And we do know that sometimes when it comes to faith, there may be instances and issues of conflict. Now, how many of us are watching the Olympics that are happening right now? And one thing that I noted in watching the Olympics is that the women in the Olympics who are wearing the hijab have been asked not to wear the hijab, and it's actually banned in France, and have been asked instead to wear a hat of sort. And so my question is, what strategies do you use to manage conflicts that can arise from differing values and beliefs within your organization? And so I'm going to start with you, Janan, because you wear the hijab, excuse me, and then EJ, I'm going to toss it over to you.
And I'm glad actually you brought up the hijab, because I think when it comes to Muslim women, that's one of the issues that we most often have to deal with, whether it's schools, whether it's, for years we had to fight with driver license agencies, passport agencies, getting statements from them and to make sure that they respected, women. And I think, even just bringing the issue of France, I think most often, at least what I haven't encountered, is that when we have instances where people really say that, okay, someone is hired for a job based on their resume, based on a lot of different things. They see them come in hijab, suddenly they have them in the back in the back. They don't want them to be up front, you know? So I think at play is racism, really. And with France, I mean, this is a colonialist power that had colonized North Africa and so many of the Muslims and did some atrocious things. But now that some of the Muslims are there, they don't want that. So you can be, you know, you can be free to undress, but you're not free to dress, you know? So again, it's a level of racism. And so, and the way that I have always approached it is trying, first of all, to educate people, to really help them to understand that this is just a religious thing, and put it in perspective. You know, if it was Catholic nun, you know, for example, or I always make a joke and say, I've never seen images of the Virgin Mary in a miniskirt. So why do you have a problem with the way we dress? You know, so trying to kind of be light about it, but educating people about it, and all else fails, you fight it.
There it is. Point, period. EJ, what would you like to add?
Just say amen, right? I would agree. I think, for me, a strategy is the teachable moment. I think it's sometimes people are in such conflict, but it's conflict without reasoning, it's conflict without knowledge, and it's conflict without insight, right? And so there are some structures that are too big to dismantle from one conversation, right? Like going after a whole country's approach to a response to a cultural garb, which is required, may be hard, but you can break down some of those bricks of systematic barriers just one brick at a time, right? Chip it away by one person who has their hands on that brick that they control. I remember even being in healthcare when there would be physicians who were bothered because a patient didn't want them to be seen by them. And then I would try to understand, I would look up the patient and find out their background. Culturally, they were not only just not comfortable, but it was a restriction for a female to be seen by a male physician. And so understand that, right? Have the teachable moment that don't take this personally, doctor, him, but recognize the impact that it's going to have on the individual, which will also shut down everything else. I would tell them, guess what? They're not going to share things with you. They're not going to be open with you about their background, because there's a certain environment that's now invaded versus an open exchange of information that you as physicians are going to need. When they realize they're not going to get the intel they need, they know they can't serve and diagnose and treat. So then we said, it's not just for them, it's for you as well. Those conversations then shifted the approach and then allowed us to then build in certain policies and build in certain allowances and build in certain understandings and educations that people weren't getting. Instead of just fighting it, stopping back, teachable moment, learn, and you hope that some kind of behavioral change can happen.
Right, because at the end of the day, conflict is all about your safety needs, basic human nature. We're all in it for safety, physiological or psychological or physical. Yeah, you're right. If you're not getting that, you don't necessarily tie to what's happening, but you become defensive. Not that I'm trying to defend the situation here, but you become defensive. You become defensive in the situation and not realizing what's driving it. That's what's causing the conflict. And if you are a strong woman of faith and you're trying to uphold the values that you were raised with, and now all of a sudden you're in a situation, your immediate defense mechanism kicks in and conflict arises. So again, going back to earlier, what you were saying is, how do you dive in and really uncover what's the root cause of what's happening so that we can address the root cause, not the mask of everything that's going on around.
And so I believe that every woman there's 4 people that every woman needs in her life, and one of them being an ally. And so my question then, Sarah, to you is, how can we be better allies to those who perhaps we don't share the same faith? So what can we do to support that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm looking forward to spending some time with you, because we got to learn and we have to step back and understand, what is the person all about? God designed us for community and relationships. And so why not take advantage of that and say, okay, if this is who I'm designed to be, tap into all that relationship that we have here with PD, with those of us that are sitting here today, and figure out, what is it that motivates you? What drives you? What is your basic foundation that you're building off of from a belief system, and try and find the likeness in all of that and build from there. because that's what really is going to help us become better allies, to say we may have a different perspective on religion, but the faith and your spirituality is the common denominator. So how do we build off of that?
Excellent. Yes, is there a question
There's a
online?
few things. It's
I want to hear what they're
And this is an invitation too, as well as the folks who are here in person. So a couple things that came up here. One, there's a hope that there is a discussion on the intersection of politics and faith, religion, and the polarization of racial and social issues. So just planting that seed. And then there's another note from an intro Sarah alluded to. Some faiths are right leaning and some are left leaning, and they put those in quotations. How do you manage the intersection, intermingling of politics with your faith? So there's a desire to get there. So I'm just wanted to uplift it while we're in the convo.
No, I appreciate you bringing that forward, because that definitely directly ties to what's happening in the Olympics in France. So let's talk about it. Can you be, a Democrat and not believe in abortion? Is that possible, right? Or what do women's rights look like if you find yourself on the left or on the right? So when those sort of conversations are coming up, maybe in your religious sectors, perhaps at work, when you hear something that doesn't necessarily align with party lines, and I use that in quotation marks, how do you respond? How do you respond? I'll just toss it out, whoever feels most comfortable starting.
Well, I am probably the most non-political person in my family, for some intentional reasons, right? Because I'll say this, because I struggle with absolute truths within one party. So to your initial question, it was a springboard question, but so can you be this and not believe this? Absolutely, because I don't think that there's any one persona tied to a political party, Democratic, Republican, Independent, whatever it is, that you can say, yep, from 1 to 752, I'm aligned with everything. I think the same thing happens in doctrine and in denominations. As I mentioned, I mean, from birth to about college, I grew up in a very committed Catholic home. Yet at the same time, it's where I found my faith and built my strongest connection to the Lord. Then I went into a Baptist environment, and then I landed up and I go to Kojic Church, right? All very different environments, but something that I was always been challenged by is, what do I personally believe? And I think that is the connection with faith versus religion, right? Faith is very personal. Religion is very external. Faith is individual. It's on the inside. It comes from "fidere" as a Latin word. It's like, what do I trust in, and who do I trust in, and how does that shape who I am? And then religion just becomes the platform of the environment, or the allyship, where you can then practice that faith. But you still have to make personal decisions about, what do I put my name on? What do I ascribe to? Where do I add my voice to? And it's okay sometimes to stop back and pause your voice until you have a full understanding and assurance of what you want to speak up about. But I think it's more than fine. I think that sometimes people try to put us in a box where you're this label. I never forget, if I have time for a quick story, I never forget, my mom worked for the sheriff's department. I grew up in Maryland, and one of my first jobs is I used to work the elections, right? And I used to go to the election. I was a little junior election worker, and I got a little check. I think it was like $65, and I was sitting in my seat, and this little kid comes up. And now, mind you, where I grew up, there were not a lot of people that look like me, right? Not a lot at all. Like, I count them on 2 fingers, right? So I'm in this election poll, and this little girl walks up, Sarah, and she says, "You're Black." And the mother was like, she turned beet red. She was so embarrassed. I'm like, "It's okay." I said, "I am, sweetheart." Like, she was so astounded. Like, I don't know if she'd ever run anybody look at me. And I am. And then it hit me that she could visibly see who I was, and she had a comment about it. It was the first time, and I was going into college, the first time when I thought about my political affiliation. Does someone look at me and make an estimation about, am I a Democrat or a Republican? See where I'm going? And so that was the first time I really got challenged about, I checked it off because it was my parents' party, but what do I understand and believe? And from then on, I've always thought, what do I consider myself? Where do I identify in political lines? Am I willing to cross over lines to learn from others? Because I'm just curious about,
That
why
part.
are you so connected to what you believe in?
That
And
part.
is there something that I could be missing? So, long answer, but that's my political spiel.
Janan?
Yeah, if I can just add, first of all, amen, sister. Um, you know, I think that's part of the problem that we have both in our society and in general, is when any one group, even the one that you might subscribe to, seems to believe that they have a monopoly on truth. And they have them, and you know, and their truth is the ultimate truth. And there's nothing to share, or there's, you know, their truth is superior to someone else's truth. And I think that is really the problem. You know, we were talking a little bit yesterday. How did I manage to become the, you know, the religious leader of Micah, which is like predominantly, you know, Christian male pastors overwhelmingly. And I think it came down to this. It came down to the way that I dealt with people, which is really, I believe, based in my faith, which is to acknowledge where everyone is and acknowledge that God created everyone. And there's a beautiful verse actually in the Quran that we there's many verses, but this one that always says that, you know, that God created human beings from a single pair of a male and a female, and made them into nations and tribes so that they may come to know and cherish one another and not despise each other. And the best amongst all is the one who is most conscious of God. And so who am I? God did not go on vacation and put me in charge to say that, you know, you are better or I am better, etc. That's not my realm. My realm is to really learn from the different truths. And I think that for any of you, I grew up in a family that was very, very entrenched in interfaith work and interfaith relations. And I grew up in that family and continued that work. And what I found is that I learned so much from members of other faiths, and it made me a stronger Muslim because it forced me also to kind of think about, where do I stand on this? And it's like, it doesn't mean that I'm right, you're wrong. We're all created for a purpose. You are wrong when what you do hurts other people, you know, and you are wrong when what you do takes away the rights of other people. But if you have specific beliefs, you know, and this is what makes you who you are, and this is what you subscribe to, you know, I celebrate that because this is who you are. And imagine if we were all exactly identical. What a boring world.
How boring that would be. So before you jump in there, Sarah, thank you both. I want to bring in the conversation of inclusivity, because really that's at the heart of the matter where we're headed, right? And when you're thinking about creating an inclusive environment, each one of you are in a position of leadership, either running your own business or working in a corporate business environment, working with, you know, religious groups and such. And so my question becomes, what steps do you take to create that inclusive environment when you see it may be going down the wrong path, when you see that we're not respecting the other humans that are around us? What do you do to ensure or to support and uplift that respect of diverse groups? And then Sarah, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great tie into what we were just talking about in terms of, you know, our stance on things. It goes back to, how are we understanding the people that are around us, and not just saying, okay, I need to look for to meet this quota, blah, blah, blah. It's really getting down to, who is the person that is best suited for what I'm looking for, what I need, and where I need to go. How do I be open to uncover what that person really is, about what they represent, what their brand is, who they are, and getting that frame of reference? Because, you know, to what you said earlier, we bring a ton of baggage to wherever we're going, and we have to learn. We think we're dropping that baggage, but we're not. It's who we are. You know, I was in a project once where it was with a company that said, oh, we've got the culture of the company representatives and then the culture of all the new contractors that are coming in. And I said, no, you don't. You have about 8 different cultures and frames of reference that are coming to the table here, because we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different families, different ethnicities, different cultures from where we grew up. And we're bringing that to the table in how we approach authority, how we approach process, how we approach conversations. And so you have to be exactly what you're saying, open to at least hearing what's the other side, another side is talking about. What is their truth? What's my truth? And is there a common theme? So that's usually how I approach it, understanding their frame of reference and respecting that frame of reference, and then giving them that respect, but then giving them that sense of belonging, asking the questions and allowing them to feel that they are heard. Because once they belong, they feel like they're being heard, then you immediately have that trust and everything goes from there.
Nice. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add just something else. I think also for those of us that are in positions of leadership, I think it becomes incumbent upon us also to make sure that is really practiced. The respect is practiced. I run a Muslim Women's Coalition. Half of my employees are not Muslim. I have a Jewish man on the Muslim Women's Coalition as part of our staff, because I cannot talk about the importance of relationships, the importance of really knowing each other and working with each other if I'm not practicing what I preach. You know what I mean? And you can go now and talk to any of them, and everyone feels comfortable. They feel comfortable. They feel free to speak, whatever it is that's on their mind. And we just found out for the first time that, this very kind of like more liberal group, that we have a Republican amongst us, which is probably more different than some of the religions, but she's very comfortable. She's part of our group. Again, once again, it's about people, and that's what we have to get to. We have to recognize that people are not their labels. People are not they are not, everyone has a faith that they believe in, and within the same family you might have differing faiths or differing levels of whatever it is you want to call it. But what is really, really important is that we have to see each person as an individual human being with tremendous gifts, and gifts that we can share and learn from.
Excellent. So, EJ, I know you were formally, right now, since retired, DEI practitioner, and I'm sure you are seeing sweeping across the land all of the former DEI positions. Microsoft just ended their DEI position, citing that it's no longer necessary. So my question then becomes, when we're talking about inclusivity, when we're talking about ensuring that we're bringing everyone apart, how do we measure success now if we don't have these roles in place anymore, or someone to hold them accountable? What do we do?
Right. No, I think a few things have to happen. In fact, I was working with a client this week, and they are struggling because some of their client base, it's a marketing firm that I'm working with, that their client base is so varied on how bold they can be with doing diversity work. And I told them, don't get frustrated, just learn first. Like, figure out what are their triggers, with you to tie it to something that you already know is a priority that they can't dismantle and take down, right? So in healthcare, we were really aiming to not just do D&I in an independent way, but it ties to patient experience. That's never going to go away in healthcare, right? Or safety or quality. Find the things that already will not move at mattering to leadership, and then help them see how D&I can be an impact factor, or can help to move some barriers that they're trying to achieve. It's very hard to measure success, but the measurements are going to change. It's inevitable, but it's just a matter of not getting disheartened and finding ways to reimagine. I don't mean to like give up the fight or to give up the race, but you got to be wise. You have to be strategic, because either you fully exit or you stay in the game and recognize the new rules of the game. I come from a family that love playing cards. I don't play because they're much more competitive than me, and I don't like losing. Actually, I don't want them to feel bad when I had to win. We'll go with that, Shanae. Just tell Trey that. But certain card games have certain rules based on how they're played. Do you guys know that? So, anybody heard the game like spades, right? Certain cards in the deck have different value based on how those players play the game. It's called the house rules. And so years ago, my husband really challenged me, and I said, I was getting frustrated with something at my company, and he said, Joy, do you know the house rules? And I said, what do you mean? Like, he said, every organization has its own house rules. So don't be mad at them, just learn them. Or else you'll be frustrated because you're going to keep playing cards that don't have the same value as everyone else is valuing. So I think the same thing right now in D&I, you got to learn the house rules, know where people are edgy, know where they're comfortable, know where they're not willing to be bold, and build a relationship. You asked the question earlier about building allies, and you talked about the power. That's why I love the power of PD. PD enables a platform to build relationship. You can never be an ally or have an ally that's a stranger. Just don't forget that. It takes proximity and relationship to be an ally. And so making those connections enable you to maybe then influence some people where their minds can shift. And you could really be surprised that that could happen. And it may happen without a title. It may happen without a certain ascribed association or cost center or department code. This work can be done anywhere in any business.
Can I just add one comment? And I think, because we're talking about faith and leadership, and it was interesting to me again, with this entire shift and things like that. But you know what? It doesn't take a government or policies to impose upon us, okay, you need to meet these qualifications. There's nothing to prevent us from meeting those qualifications. There's a lot of things that particularly those in charge can do, and you don't need anyone telling you, okay, this is your new policy. So I think that I always like to look at the positive. I think creating a system where this is the natural way of doing things without having the policy is where we should aim.
Absolutely. So we always say follow the rings with professional dimensions. And I also believe that we are facing and moving forward fast towards the future. So that being the case, my question is, what does better look like? And this is for each one of you as we start to wrap up our conversation, which is crazy. And it goes so fast, it goes so fast. There's always more questions than time, right? So looking ahead, how do you see the role of faith and identity evolving in the business world, in your sectors? Where are we headed? So I'll start with you, Sarah.
Yeah, I love this question because this is what PD is all about, in my opinion. And I look at it, this is the gig, you may have heard, this is the gig economy where people have multiple jobs to, just be able to survive or look forward to how do I transition from one to another. And so when we're looking at all of that, as you are working through those challenges or those opportunities, employers have to look at, I'm not just hiring a person, I'm hiring the entire package that comes with. And so if that package is your faith, make sure that you are wearing that consistently so they know who you are as an individual and you can represent your entire self to that entire platform that you're working with, whether it's at the corporate level or coaching or, all of the above. Just be true and authentic because at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter. And as we see more movement towards artificial intelligence, we're going to see more movement for that need for human connection. I think there's a reason that artificial intelligence is coming in. Nothing is by coincidence in this world, I believe. And if this is what's forcing us to get more of that human connection, I think you're going to start to see a need to be able to really emphatically say, how do I connect with more humans? How do I connect with individuals at the level that they are at, where I can come to you as opposed to you always coming to me?
Erica Joy?
Yeah. So I guess in this time, right? And if we're thinking about the timing, I'm encouraged by a generation that is more curious and more bold in their voice. And I think we as leaders need to be responsible enough to help invest in them and give them the confidence to use that voice. Again, I can't help but tie back. There's a platform where PD offers, and we see generations connecting where you've got newer generations who are emerging with talent and innovation and creativity and ideas and programming and offerings. And then you've got sustained legacy generations that are open to have the conversation to even then pour in their wisdom and insight. You need all those. We can't get new fiery populations that push out. You need the combination of all that. And I think that's what's hopeful. And in all of that, I do think people are open to learn more about exploring their own faith, not just subscribing to someone because their mother, father, auntie, grandmother, or somebody that took them somewhere to some building to assemble, but for their own personal discovery. and then they're willing to learn about others, and then seeing those relationships happen across those varying faiths, that becomes a secret sauce for our country.
I'll give you the final word.
Sure. I am also going to ditto that I am really encouraged by a lot of the young people. This is a generation that came up really looking at a lot of different diversity, looking at racial, ethnic, gender, and they learned to all really work together and be together. And they're also a population that I have seen that is not willing to just accept what authority tells them. If they see injustice, they stand up to it. They will, I'm Palestinian American. For quite a while, we had the students that were doing encampments at universities. In spite of whatever was happening, it's because they believed in something. You know what I mean? And so I see this, and I'm very, very encouraged because they're not even pushed to do something out of fear. Out of fear of what will happen, repercussions, etc. So I'm really, really encouraged by that. As far as like faith traditions, again, I think that if we take a look at it and look at it as something that is so enriching. It's enriching to us. It's enriching to the work environment. It's just enriching to the conversations that take place. I think that's so important, and I think it requires more knowledge. It requires education. It requires that we get out of our bubbles and really learn about others. I'm on a particular board. I don't want to mention which board, but they're doing this huge project. And so they thought that, okay, here's their diversity. They have several images of several women in hijab standing at a bar. And I'm looking at them, and so it's like, this is just so basic. It's so basic. And so I'm telling the architects, well, I'm glad you're, trying to incorporate diversity, but it needs to make sense. If they're dressed like they're Muslim, and they're, it's highly unlikely they're standing in front of a bar with a drink in their hand, but just to give you an idea of how much we have really to learn, and we have to become global citizens, regardless of whether we like it or not. And this is one of the ways of becoming global citizens.
Thank you for that final thought. So we know as that faith is something, it's personal. And yes, we congregate together to affirm our faith. Lamentation says, don't forsake the gathering of the saints, or the gathering of people coming together. And so I'm curious, as we start to close out, what is a tangible practice that perhaps we can mirror here in the space on today? What is a tangible practice that perhaps we can mirror in the space on today?
I will start. I think don't assume anything about anyone, and don't think that they will be offended if you ask a question. They would much rather you ask them the question about them than ask someone else that might not know, and then, leave with your own preconceived notions. I think there's so much opportunity to learn from each other, and to allow people to represent themselves is where we need to start.
Listening to you, I gotta think of an answer. I would say give yourself some shatter space. Give yourself the permission to allow some preconceived notions. When you said that, that's what kind of like kicked my thinking. And things that even if you grew up feeling a certain way, allow yourself to allow some of those ideologies to just shatter. Because you could rebuild something else. Some beautiful mosaics are made from broken pieces. You guys know that, right? And so sometimes we have to break models of what we have held on to for so long, because we held on to something so much, and we have the question, why am I even holding on to this thought about a person or a background or a geography or a group of people? So I would just say give yourself permission to have some shatter spaces.
They all took my thunder. So, I was gonna say, check your limiting beliefs. We all have them, particularly those of us that have been around for a long time. you don't realize what you bring, the baggage that you bring with you, and start asking that question, why am I thinking this way? Why did I have that thought? And turn it around and, work through my mess is my message. Not one of us is perfect here. And, that's why we need that faith to be able to pull us through. And if you have a mess, look at it and say, no more woe's me, no more victim mentality, but how do I make that a message so that I can turn around and bring others with me? Because chances are they probably have that same mess, but just from a different perspective, and you can now be allies together. So figure out how do you make your mess your message and remove those limiting beliefs, unlock the door.
Wonderful. I do want to toss it out to our group who's here with us, if there happen to be any questions or any final questions that are online.
There's a quick one online. If
Please.
you all would like to explore this, it's really about a general decrease in the interest of religion. And if you all like have seen or experienced that in any way, and any ideas for how to address that.
Well, I would question, is it the decrease in religion or decrease in faith? Because as we were talking about before, religion, it's the structure, it's the doctrine, it's the rules and the regulations that, younger generations I know struggle with. I just want to believe and work with something that shares the same values with me. So is the faith decreasing or is the religion? I can see where the religion side is decreasing because the rules seem to be stronger and stronger and stronger. And people are recognizing, look, my faith is my faith, my relationship with God, my relationship with Jesus. How do I work through that? And, not everybody's going to come along with me, but if I can articulate that message in a way that's authentic to me, then I'm going to help bring others along. But I'm not going to go out and say, you need to, blah, blah, blah. It's who I am and it's just part of me. And if you want to have a relationship with me, then you're going to know you get the full me. And that comes the whole faith side of things too. So I see, personally, I've seen the religion side decrease, but the faith side increasing.
One thing I would add to that as well, so taking liberty as the moderator. So my grandfather was a pastor for 42 years. My husband is third generation pastor, bishop designee, Wayne Aaron Robbins Sr. Shout out to my boo. And one of the things that my grandfather would often say is that a person should be able to read the Bible by your life and never have to open the Bible. And so by your life and how you show up and how you demonstrate, that should be enough of a witness for them so that if they never take the time to open the Bible, they have seen it through how you engage with them, how you interact with them, how you show love towards them. And so that's something that I often will keep in mind. Like I never want my witness to be spoken ill of in how I show up and engage with someone else, because I might be the only Bible that they ever meet or the only Jesus that they ever meet.
I think that's the tie to leadership, because we talked about leadership in organizations, but leading in your faith too. I agree with that. I mean, in our family we say, preach the gospel, use words when necessary. You don't have to use words to express the values and core connections that's tied to faith. And so leading in your community, how do you model that and show that? And that I think people are challenged with organized religion. Some people are fed up. And so the construct of organized religion then says, well, then let me now reduce my faith because there's no place for me to either learn from or exercise it. But how do we give ourselves permission to be unconventional? Our husband's pastor in the same circles and they've known each other for years and they've had to use different approaches. It's okay that there's a young kid who'll come in a white t-shirt and saggy pants, but have a connection and conversation with the pastor. We had implemented like these breakfasts after church. Our gathering day is Sunday. It was more energy in the little breakfast room after service because he would just sit down sweating and tired and they would be like, what did you really mean when you said, but that space where the unorganized, the more informal ways, and that we should show up outside of our assembly days. Everything outside of Sunday for us, that's our day. Everything outside of Sunday should actually be stronger and more intentional so that people can have a place to have their faith built up.
You know, the Pew Research study on religion, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to statistics and things like,
You're in
must
good
be the
company. You're in good
microbiology,
company.
the microbiology background. Yeah. Anyhow, it says that, you know, the fastest growing religion is spirituals, you know? So it's not those institutional religions. And I think that as somebody that often works in spaces where there are young people, it's because they have maybe sometimes grown up seeing those spaces as places that people go to and then come back and do whatever it is that they want to do. And for many of these young people, they see really faith as a call to action. It's a movement. It's something it's not something that you just hold inside, but it's doing. It's, you know, stopping oppression. It's feeding the hungry. It's actually doing something. So they almost see it that I can do this without actually going to a, you know, a brick institution or whatever it is. And I think that, you know, as we were mentioning earlier about learning new ways, I think we have to learn new ways to engage an entire really segment of society that is looking at faith in a different way. And I think there's a lot to learn from them.
So we, yes.
Can I just say something real quick?
Please.
I think so. I'm really inspired by this because I think at PD we're trying to drive this point home that we can have all of the values and ideas that we want, but until it comes down to the actions and decisions that we're making, the action is like where this lives. And so to answer the last question that you had of like what can we do today, is really do a quick assessment of our actions and the decisions that we've made and see if they align to who we want to be. And I forgot who made this point, but the idea that another thing that I think we need to do better as leaders is articulate like how we arrive at decisions, right? This is my first time hearing that Janan switched her career because of a faith and a calling to action, right? And I think when we at PD we are trying to change the ways that we measure success, like we are, because we want those ways to be more inclusive of like who we are as women and character, and not just the bottom line of the organization. Did my corporation make money? Now I'm on every poster, on every billboard, and I'm successful, right? But like, how did you do it? Who was involved? What was the team? How did your faith play into that? It's the multiple dimensions that we are trying to push into the space to help people understand that these are all things that should be considered, right? And so I just felt like I wanted to share that because I think that my job is to bring everything back to PD for you all. So I hope I'm doing my job. I see my bosses right here. Let's include that. But the idea that it's an action and that we are the ones that are saying, you know, we're not celebrating somebody just for these things that we've always celebrated them for. Like we are actually, when we're choosing the leaders and we're choosing the platforms and we're choosing the people who we want to sit down and listen to, we're looking at this. And you all are not just saying, I made this great decision because I'm just a great leader and I just know how to run this company. But like, no, I'm reflecting, I'm conscious, I'm in community with people who are different from me. And that's why I'm making the good decisions that I'm making, because that is what naturally people will aspire to. So I just put that out to all of us because we're all leaders. And that's something I want to do better of with our membership too, and telling you all, no, we didn't just come to No Studios because it's No Studios and it's cool. Or we're not just having this meeting and this topic because it's fun and Shanae likes it. Like it's deeper than that. And I think I want to do better as well of articulating the decisions and why we're doing what we're doing so that other people can know that that's an expectation.
Thank you. Yes, that. So as we close out, I would like to hear from each one of you one final word. We've been saying faith and leadership. And it's so ironic because, you know, our president and CEO took my thunder, but nevertheless, teasing. But faith and leadership. So if you were to think of it as an equation, faith plus leadership equals what? And that what I'd love to have as your final word to close out our time. Faith plus leadership equals what? And while you think about that, I'd like to thank Professional Dimensions for creating a space for us to have such a pivotal conversation. Can we give it up for PD? Yes. very engaging and bold, because this is also a topic that a lot of people don't think should go together and align together in a space. But PD, once again, is leading the charge. Thank you to our panelists for your insightful contributions to this discussion, to the individuals that are also online. I want to say a special thank you to Shanae Jenkins for inviting me to moderate today's conversation. Again, the experiences and wisdom highlighted today from everyone that's in this room create a profound impact on what faith and identity and leadership really looks like when it comes to us being with one another. We do hope that this conversation continues to provide a springboard for ongoing conversations outside of this space today. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Janan, and please offer our final word.
Well, you asked about faith and leadership. I would say success. That equals success if it was an equation. But I do have to say that I don't think, and I would probably say for anybody here, I don't think anyone gets up one day and says, I'm going to be a leader. You know what I mean? I think that you program your life in a way that is meaningful to you, and then suddenly others see you as a leader, you know? If you look at me, like, you know, at home, etc., sometimes I think, man, you know, why do people think I'm a leader? But wherever I go, people will say, okay, you are a leader. But it's not something that you really think about. It just happens to be that that's how others envision you because of the way that you set your life.
Okay.
Faith plus leadership
Faith plus
equals
leadership equals elevated impact.
Sarah?
Leadership is influence. And so when you tackle faith plus leadership means you are influential. You're influential in every aspect of your life.
Again, I say thank you to everyone for being a part of this conversation today. And I want to remind you to please take this time to reflect as we leave here today. How will you continue to identify? How will you continue to match your faith plus your leadership? And what will it equal for you? And above all else, continue to follow the rings and join us for our next conversation. Thank you.